I got uninvited from my mom's birthday because I did not look good enough standing next to my sister's boyfriend. They said I would ruin the photos. They said I would make the family look bad. But here is the part they never saw coming. The man they praised, protected, and held above me turned out to be my employee. And he only realized who I was the moment he looked into the camera right as the entire family was tearing me apart behind my back. You think betrayal hurts. Try listening to your own mother say you embarrass her, knowing you have silently paid her bills for years. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you are watching from. I love seeing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection makes the hardest memories easier to carry. Thank you. And now, here is my story. My name is Daniel Brooks, and what I am about to share is not just about a birthday. It is about years of being overlooked, used, and finally realizing what family really means. If stories like mine speak to you, I would truly appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this find the people who need to hear them most. I wake up before the sun reaches the line of pines behind my house in Boise, Idaho. Same routine every morning. I grind my coffee, let the radio mumble the weather report, and sit for a minute in the quiet before driving to SunPoint Energy Technologies. I have lived like this for years now, steady, structured, predictable. But the silence I keep around me is not peaceful. It is the kind of silence that grows out of distance, the kind that forms when you have spent 3 years trying not to think about the people who share your blood. 3 years since I last spoke to my family. 3 years since everything cracked open on a day that was supposed to be about celebrating my mother. Most people who meet me think I am a typical Idaho engineer with a modest job. Someone who fixes solar panels or tightens bolts on tall metal frames in the desert heat. My family thinks the same. They have never asked for details, and I never offered. Explaining that I co-founded a clean energy startup that is expanding into South Carolina always felt unnecessary. If they were not curious, I was not going to force the conversation. I never cared about credit, but looking back, that silence did not build space, it built walls. My parents, Robert Brooks and Helen Brooks, still live in Charleston, South Carolina, in an old adobe house that cacks in winter and traps heat in summer. They love it there. The house is filled with decorative pottery, bright woven rugs, and pictures of my sister Angela Brooks in every stage of her life. First dance recital, high school graduation, first office job, first car. Growing up, I learned to scan the walls for myself and rarely found anything more than a corner of my shoulder or the top of my head. I was not mistreated, but I was easy to overlook. Angela Brooks, older by 3 years, always commanded the spotlight. I became skilled at stepping aside before anyone asked. I rarely think about childhood memories, but sometimes pieces float back school nights where she cried over a breakup and the whole house moved around her family dinners where my accomplishments were mentioned like filler between updates about Angela's life, holiday pictures where I angled myself to fit the frame. It did not bother me then. It bothers me now only because of how that dynamic never changed. I remember the last real conversation with my family, the one that shattered everything. I was told I was not welcome at my mother's birthday because I did not look good enough next to Angela's boyfriend. Just those words, no softness, no pause. As if removing me was the most reasonable solution. And as strange as it sounds, that was not even the worst part. There was something else hidden underneath something that I only understood later. That memory sits at the edge of everything I do, waiting for me in the quiet moments. One morning at the office, after checking the project timeline for our South Carolina expansion, I opened an email from the state's energy department. It mentioned a new operations coordinator joining our Charleston partnership team transferred from Greenville to oversee site inspections. His name flashed across my screen. Christopher Hayes, a name I had seen once or twice in forwarded reports, but never given much thought to. I did not know then that he was the man my family was so desperate to impress. I did not know he was the one they thought was too polished, too successful, too perfect for me to stand beside. But the way his name sat on the screen felt like a quiet warning, a small signal that something was already shifting beneath the surface, waiting for the moment it would finally break through. 3 weeks before my mother's birthday, I booked a flight to Charleston and put in a request for 3 days off. I had not been home properly in years, and a part of me hoped this visit might change something. A reset, maybe. I planned to arrive early, help with the cooking, buy her the same lavender-scented candle she loved from the Maplewood Market. I did not expect anything dramatic. I just thought being there would matter. When I called the house, I expected my mother's bright voice, the one she used for guests and phone calls from extended relatives. Instead, my father picked up. His voice was flat and clipped, carrying the same undertone I used to hear when he spoke to telemarketers. He asked why I was calling. I said I was coming home for Mom's birthday and asked if there was anything they needed me to bring. There was a long, uncomfortable stretch of silence, like he was deciding how honest he should be. He started slowly explaining that Angela was bringing her new boyfriend home, a young manager, well-spoken, presentable, someone my parents were proud to introduce. Then he shifted, choosing his words with a sharpness I felt even through the phone. He said my job was not something easy to talk about in front of guests, that people do not really understand what I do, that it might be better for everyone if I sat this year out. The phrase "we do not want to lose face" slipped out of him like a quiet confession. I did not understand at first. I asked him what he meant. That was when the twist landed clean, cold, final. He said if I insisted on coming, I should not call him my father anymore. Just like that. It felt insane, disproportionate, cruel. I remember staring at my kitchen counter, waiting for him to laugh or soften or say he did not mean it. He did not. The call ended with the same sharpness it began. Afterward, I stood there trying to make sense of it. Memories rushed in the years of being compared to Angela. My awkwardness in family photos, the way every small mistake of mine seemed louder than her biggest failures. But none of that explained being disowned over something as superficial as not looking good enough. Then I remembered the one thing my family never acknowledged. The one truth they never knew because I never told them I had been paying their bills. All of them for 3 years straight, every month without missing a single payment. Something made me grab my phone and open my banking app. Maybe I needed to see the numbers to remind myself that I was not imagining how much I had carried. I scrolled through the list. Electricity, water, gas, internet repairs, line after line after line. More than $17,000 in 3 years. 17,000 spent quietly, unasked, unthanked. And yet somehow I was the embarrassment. As the screen glowed in my hand, one question rose to the surface. Quiet, bitter, honest. If I was the one they were ashamed of, then what standard were they using to measure worth? I did not have the answer then, but I would soon. I sat in my living room that night with my phone in my hand, letting the glow of the screen spill across the coffee table. One by one, I scrolled through every bill I had paid for my parents over the past 3 years. Electric, water, gas, internet, even the maintenance on the heating system that broke one winter. The list felt endless. Each line item carried a date, a dollar amount, and a version of me who genuinely believed I was doing the right thing. I had never needed acknowledgement. I had never expected thanks. But as I looked at the screen, the reality of what I had carried alone hit differently than it ever had before. I remembered the day my mother first mentioned their rising expenses. She sounded tired, worried, almost embarrassed, as she explained how everything kept getting more expensive. She added quietly that Angela was already handling a lot, as if I needed a reminder of how heavy my sister's life supposedly was. I did not question it. I did not ask for proof. I simply agreed to help, thinking it would be temporary, thinking they would tell me when they found their footing again. They never did. The more I scrolled, the more a familiar discomfort settled into my chest. For years, I had believed Angela was shouldering part of the burden. I had even asked a few times gently if she was helping with anything. My mother always dodged the question. She would say, "Your sister has her own responsibilities, or she is helping in other ways." Looking at the long list of payments now, I realized those answers had never been real. Angela had not contributed a single dollar. Every bill listed was tied directly to my account, quietly withdrawn like clockwork. I told myself I did not want credit. I told myself family helps family, even if the help is one-sided. But sitting there in the quiet, I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel before. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was a sense of betrayal that came from realizing I had been treated like an invisible safety net, not a son. I could not understand why responsibility automatically fell on me, why I was the one expected to understand, to provide, to sacrifice, while Angela never needed to lift a finger. Why it was so easy for them to erase everything I had done. My thumb hovered over the screen as I continued scrolling, and that was when I saw something that made me lean forward. A repair invoice from 6 months ago, roof work totaling over $1,300. I had never heard about a roof repair. No one had mentioned it. No one had asked if I could help or if I even wanted to. They had simply connected the bill to my account, letting the payment process without a word. It was the quiet assumption behind it that struck me the hardest. Not only was I the financial fallback, but they felt entitled enough to hide the request entirely. That was the moment something shifted in me, not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. I opened my payment settings and removed every automatic transfer, electricity, water, gas, internet, all of it. My finger hesitated for only a second, not because I feared what would happen to them, but because this was the first time I had chosen myself. After everything was turned off, I placed my phone face down on the table and stared at the ceiling. I told myself I would stay silent, completely silent, for as long as it took. I needed to know what my family reached for when they could no longer reach for my bank account. I needed to know if they would call because they missed me or because they needed something from me. And as the room settled into stillness, a single question surfaced in my mind, sharper than anything else, when everything in Charleston eventually stopped working. Would they think of me as a son or just the source of a payment they had lost? A week passed after I canceled all the payments. Life moved on around me the way it always did. Meetings, project updates, coffee breaks with co-workers who only knew the version of me that existed outside my family. I did not bring up the situation with anyone, not because I was hiding it, but because saying the words out loud made it feel too real, too heavy. I wanted a few more days where the silence still belonged to me. Then one afternoon, while I was reviewing a site proposal, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Nothing warm, nothing personal, just a short message. "The internet bill is due. Please take care of it." No mention of my upcoming visit. No acknowledgement of the call that had severed the last thread between us. Not even a basic question about how I was doing. It was as if the only role I existed in was the one attached to their utilities. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the weight of everything I had allowed for years. This moment was a test I had never taken before. For the first time since adulthood, I forced myself not to respond, not to explain, not to defend, to do nothing at all. My silence was not meant to punish. It was my way of finally stepping out of the cycle I had lived in my entire life. The next day, my father called. I watched the phone light up on my desk, vibrating insistently. When I did not answer, he left a voicemail. His tone was not angry or worried. It was impatient, almost annoyed. The power company called about an unpaid bill. What is going on? There was no curiosity, no concern, just frustration that something was not being handled the way it always had, as if I had disrupted a system they depended on without ever acknowledging it existed. Later that evening, another message came through, this time from Angela. Her words were sharp and direct. "Christopher will be visiting this week. Do not create problems. It was not a request. It was not even a question. It was a warning delivered with the confidence of someone who believed the world should bend around her convenience. That message said more about my family than anything else they had said in the past month. They were not worried about my silence because they missed me. They were worried because it threatened how they looked. I read her message twice, letting it settle. They were not afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing control. And suddenly, everything made sense. The years of dismissing me, the way they talked about me, the way they expected things from me without giving anything in return. My absence was not painful for them. It was inconvenient. So I made my own decision. I would stay silent all the way until my mother's birthday. Not out of revenge, but because the silence had finally become a mirror. If they wanted to see me, they would have to look directly at what they had built. And if they did not, well, the truth would show itself soon enough. I closed my phone and set it aside, knowing that the real unraveling had not even begun. On the afternoon of my mother's birthday, the adobe house in Charleston was filling up with relatives, neighbors, and anyone my parents thought would make the celebration look impressive. Meanwhile, I sat alone in my living room in Boise, a cup of cold coffee resting untouched in my hand. My phone vibrated again and again. First my mother, then my father, then Angela. I watched the calls flash across the screen but did not move to answer. I had promised myself I would remain silent no matter how loud they became. After the third call went unanswered, the messages began. My mother's text appeared first. "Where are you? Guests are arriving." I stared at it, feeling nothing but a steady, calm detachment. If she wondered how I was or why I had not replied in 3 weeks, she did not say it. About 30 minutes before the party was supposed to start, my phone buzzed again. "The power is out," she wrote. "The whole house is dark. Pay the bill." A minute later, another message from my father appeared. "There is no water. We cannot cook. Fix this now." Then Angela chimed in with her typical bluntness. "The internet crashed. No one can live stream. Do something." Not one of them asked if I was okay. Not one of them asked why I had not spoken to them. They did not mention the way they had spoken to me during that call. They did not acknowledge the tension that had divided us. All they cared about was the picture they wanted to present to the world. To them, the real disaster was not the power outage. It was the embarrassment of having guests in a house without electricity. Soon, my cousins began messaging me. People I only saw once a year somehow felt entitled to scold me. "You made your mother look bad. You ruined the whole event. Angela told us you have always been difficult." I let the messages pile up. I did not respond. I did not defend myself. I simply observed the truth of who they were when they thought I could not hear them. Then another message came through, this time from a number I did not recognize but clearly belonged to someone in the family circle. "Christopher says you do not have a real job. Stop making trouble." It hit differently, not because of the insult, but because it was the first time his name had been thrown at me like a weapon. I realized Angela must have been complaining about me long before today. Before I could process it further, my phone lit up once more. This time it was a video call from my Aunt Debbie, the one person in that house who had never treated me like an obligation. She rarely called, and never through video. I answered, and the moment the screen loaded, I saw her face framed by the warm golden light of my parents' kitchen. Behind her, voices rose and fell in chaotic waves. "It is bad here," she whispered. "They are blaming everything on you. They are saying things they should not be saying." I heard my mother's voice in the background, sharp and breaking. My father's deeper voice followed, angrier, harsher. Relatives were talking over one another, all of them feeding off the same familiar narrative. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I knew there was more coming. Something I had not seen yet, but had been circling the edges of this situation from the start. "I think you should hear what is happening. Aunt Debbie said, raising the phone slightly so I could see more of the kitchen behind her. For the first time that day, I leaned forward. I did not know what was about to happen, but every instinct in me said the moment I had been waiting for was finally arriving. I held the phone closer as the video call settled into focus. Aunt Debbie stood near the counter, but the kitchen behind her was alive with tension. Voices overlapped, silverware clattered on plates, chairs scraped against terracotta tile. And in the middle of it all, my family was talking about me as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person. I heard my mother's voice first. "He has always been careless. I do not know why he is doing this now of all times." It stung more than I expected. Not because the words were new, but because they came so easily to her. My father added, "He is jealous, it is obvious. Angela is doing well, and he cannot handle it." Someone else chimed in, "He should not be here. No one wants him here today." For a moment I could not tell which relative had said it. They all blended together, united by their complete certainty that they understood me. Then Angela stepped into view. She got close enough to the camera that her face filled most of the frame. "You really do not know shame, do you?" she snapped as if speaking directly to me. "You cannot do anything right. You just ruin things. What exactly are you good for?" Before I could respond, not that I intended to, another voice entered the frame. It was not loud. It was not angry. It simply cut through the noise like a blade through fabric. "Who are you all talking about?" I froze. I knew that voice. I had heard it in meetings and briefings usually attached to punctual reports and steady professional updates. Christopher Hayes walked into the background of the frame wearing a dark suit, his expression calm but curious. He looked at the phone, then at the people in the kitchen trying to piece together the situation. But the moment his eyes landed on me through the screen, something in his expression shifted. Surprise, recognition, and something else, nervousness. He stepped closer. "Mr. Brooks," he said, sounding uncertain. "Is that you?" Every conversation in the room stopped. My parents stared. A cousin dropped her fork. Even Angela flinched. Christopher swallowed, once straightened his posture, and said clearly, "Good evening, Mr. Brooks, boss." The kitchen went silent, truly silent. It was the kind of silence that arrives when reality rearranges itself in front of everyone at the same time. Someone asked quietly, "Boss, what does that mean?" Another whispered, "Wait, Daniel. He is the boss." My father looked stunned. My mother confused, and Angela stared at Christopher as if he had betrayed her personally. I did not need to explain anything. I simply nodded once. "I hope your introduction to the family goes smoothly," I said. My voice came out steady, almost gentle. It was the calm that arrives when truth finally slips out into the light. Before anyone could respond, before the shock could settle into accusation or excuses, I ended the call. A moment later, my phone buzzed again. An email notification from Christopher sent at the exact minute I closed the video. I did not open it yet. I sat back on the couch, letting the silence fill the room. And for the first time all day, I felt something close to clarity. Whatever came next, the truth was already out there. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, letting the warmth ground me before opening the email Christopher had sent the night before. I clicked it open, expecting something formal, maybe an apology for the awkwardness. What I found was far more personal. He wrote that he was sorry for the chaos at the birthday gathering and that he truly had not known I was Angela's brother. He said he had always respected the way I led at Sun Point Energy Technologies, the fairness, the clarity, the integrity. Then he wrote the one thing I was not prepared for. He had decided to end his relationship with Angela. He explained that her behavior toward others, not just toward me, did not align with the kind of life he wanted. He said seeing the way she spoke about me that night made everything suddenly clear. I leaned back in my chair, feeling an odd mixture of relief and sadness. Then I read the next part of his email. He admitted that months earlier, Angela had told her friends and relatives that I was a failure working some manual labor job, and that she had used those exact claims to justify why no one should expect much from me. Hearing that spelled out in writing from someone who had no reason to lie settled into me like a cold weight. It was not just that they misunderstood me. It was that Angela had built an image of me designed to be stepped over. I typed my response carefully. I told him his personal decisions were his own, and he did not need to do anything for my sake. I thanked him for being honest and wished him well. Nothing more. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A long message from Angela. She wrote that everything between her and Christopher was a misunderstanding, that she had been stressed, and that if I would just explain things to him, he would surely reconsider. She even called me the only one who can help. I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. I told her the truth. He left because of the way she treated people, not because of anything I did. I told her this was the outcome of years spent believing she could act however she wanted without consequences. It did not take long for my mother to message me next. "Why did you not help your sister?" she wrote. "You always make things worse." Then my father called, his voice sharp the moment I answered. "She is our only daughter," he snapped, as if that alone explained everything I owed them. Before I could even think of what to say, my phone rang again, this time from the HR department at Sunpoint Energy Technologies. They sounded uneasy. They told me my parents had called the corporate office, insisting that someone take action against Christopher for upsetting Angela. I closed my eyes, letting the absurdity of it settle. My own family had reached past personal boundaries and into my workplace, trying to use my title to bend a situation to their will. That was the moment I felt the final line being crossed. They were not just angry at me. They were trying to interfere with my livelihood, my reputation, and the company I helped build. By late afternoon, I drove home feeling heavier than I had in months. But the weight grew even denser when I pulled into my driveway and saw 2 suitcases on the porch. My parents stood there stone-faced, as if their arrival was the most natural thing in the world. They had not called. They had not texted. They had simply shown up to confront me. I parked the car and walked toward them, knowing exactly what kind of storm waited behind my door. The sky over Boise was gray when I opened the front door and stepped aside so my parents could enter. The cold air outside felt almost symbolic, like it was warning me how frigid this conversation would become. I shut the door behind us, not wanting the neighbors to witness the eruption I sensed was coming. My parents began softly, as if rehearsed. My mother placed a hand over her chest and said they had thought things through. My father nodded, saying maybe they had spoken too harshly over the phone and maybe things got out of hand. Then my mother added, "You are still our son, no matter what." But it did not take long for the tone to shift. My father cleared his throat and said, "The family needs your help. Needs. $600 a month should be nothing to someone as successful as you." Just like that, the real reason for their visit laid bare on my living room rug. I asked the only logical question. "How much is Angela helping?" They exchanged glances, both avoiding my eyes. My mother murmured that Angela was still young and had her own struggles. My father added that a son is supposed to be the backbone of the family. Every word was a reminder that responsibility only ever flowed one direction toward me. I sat forward on the couch and spoke calmly. "If you want me to cover everything, then we should make it official. Put the Charleston house in my name." The transformation in their faces was immediate. What had been a carefully curated friendliness melted into offense and disbelief. My father slammed his hand on the table so hard the teacup toppled and spilled across the floor. "We raised you for 20 years, he shouted. "And now you want repayment. You think you can put a price on your parents?" I did not raise my voice. I did not move from where I sat. "I am not asking for repayment," I said. "But do not pretend I owe you something. I have paid more than $17,000 of your bills in the last 3 years, and neither of you knew because you never bothered to ask how those bills were getting paid. They froze. My mother blinked rapidly, her mouth slightly open. My father stared at me as if I had spoken in a language he did not understand. It was the first time they had heard the truth. Every payment, every quiet sacrifice, every month I had carried them without so much as a thank you. The silence stretched until it became suffocating. When I finally stood, the room felt painfully small. I pointed toward the door. This conversation is over. It is time for you to go. My father's anger deflated into stunned disbelief. My mother clutched her purse with shaking hands. Neither argued. Neither apologized. They simply picked up their suitcases and stepped outside into the cold Boise air. I watched them walk down the driveway in complete silence. And in that moment I realized something final had settled between us. Something that could not be undone. The relationship, as I had known it, as I had tried to maintain it, had reached its breaking point. And for the first time in my life, I did not chase after them. I did not try to fix anything. I simply closed the door. When the door closed behind them, the house fell into a silence so complete it felt almost physical, like a weight settling across the room. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still on the doorknob, feeling the cold metal press into my palm. It was strange how quiet the world became when the noise that once defined you finally walked away. I was not relieved. I was not triumphant. I was not even angry anymore. I just felt still, as if something inside me had stopped fighting for the first time in years. I walked back into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the spill of tea that had dried on the floorboards. A small, ordinary mess left by an argument big enough to end a family. I thought about everything they had said, everything they had not said, and everything I had carried for them, without ever asking for anything in return. $17,000. Countless excuses made on their behalf. A lifetime of stepping aside so someone else could shine. I do not think I realized how exhausting it had been until it was finally over. Part of me wondered if I should feel guilty for sending them away. But guilt is a strange thing. It sits where love used to be and tries to pretend it belongs there. I knew deep down that letting them stay would have meant surrendering the last piece of myself I had left. I was not willing to do that anymore. I could not. Not after everything that had unfolded. Not after they tried to weaponize my job, my silence, my generosity. Not after they said I embarrassed them. I did not want revenge. I did not want them to suffer. I just wanted a life where I was not the default sacrifice. Maybe that sounds selfish. Maybe in another story the dutiful son stays and absorbs everything just like he always has. But that is not the life I want to live anymore. There is a point where you have to choose yourself, even if the world says family should come first. Family means nothing if it costs you your sanity. Family means nothing if it is only a place where you give and never receive. Family means nothing if love only comes with a price tag. I leaned back and let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of the past few weeks unspool inside me. The anger from that phone call, the silence I held on to like a shield, the collapse of the birthday party, Christopher calling me his boss, Angela begging for help only after everything had already fallen apart. My parents showing up with suitcases not because they missed me, but because they still believed they owned the right to my obedience. I thought about how many years I had been walking toward them trying to bridge a distance they never tried to cross themselves. How many times I hoped something would shift, that they would see me differently, treat me differently, love me differently, and how every time the outcome stayed the same. I was useful, not valued, present, not seen. A son by title, not by connection. Sitting there in the quiet, I finally let myself accept something I had spent a long time avoiding. Sometimes people do not change. Not because they cannot, but because they do not think they should. My parents had never questioned the way they treated me because the dynamic benefited them. They never asked about my life because the answers did not serve their version of the world. They never acknowledged my help because acknowledging it would mean admitting how much they depended on the son they dismissed. And Angela, she had spent her life believing the universe revolved around her, believing every spotlight was hers by default, believing she could pull strings that never belonged to her. Losing Christopher was not just heartbreak. It was the collapse of the image she had spent years building, and she needed someone to blame. That someone was always supposed to be me. But for the first time, I did not step into the role she assigned me. I did not fix. I did not explain. I did not bend. I just stood still and let the truth do what I had never done stand up for me. In that stillness, I realized something important. A lesson I should have learned years ago, but only found the strength to accept now. You do not owe loyalty to people who refuse to see you. You do not owe forgiveness to people who do not regret hurting you. And you do not owe your life to a family that only remembers you exist when they need something. Maybe this sounds harsh, but it is honest. And honesty is all I have left to give to this story. As the evening light faded through the windows, I felt something unexpected. A sense of space inside my chest, like a door, had finally opened somewhere deep within me. I was not happy. I was not healed. But I was free. Free to build a life that was not shaped by someone else's expectations. Free to love without fear of being used. Free to stop proving my worth to people determined to overlook it. I know healing will not be immediate. I know there will be days when doubt creeps in, or when the old ache returns. But I also know this. I am better off walking alone than walking with people who never wanted me to be anything more than what they could use. So before I close this chapter, I want to ask you something simple but honest. Has there ever been a moment in your life when choosing yourself felt like losing everything? Have you ever stepped away from people you love because staying meant slowly disappearing? If you have, then you understand what this moment means to me. And if you have not, I hope this story helps you recognize your own worth before someone else convinces you it does not exist. If you are still here, still listening, thank you. Truly, it means more than I can say. If you'd like to share where you're watching from, or if a part of this story echoes something in your own life, I'd be grateful to hear it in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about the quiet battles people fight behind closed doors, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that need a voice, and your support helps that voice reach a little farther. Wherever you are tonight, I hope you choose yourself.